The Keth had a policy about prisoners. It was not a cruel policy. It was not designed to cause suffering. The Keth were not, by any reasonable measure, a cruel civilization. They were efficient, methodical, possessed of a bureaucratic thoroughness that extended to every aspect of their operations, including the management of individuals they captured during territorial disputes. The policy was simple. Prisoners were assessed, categorized, housed according to their category, treated according to the standards appropriate to their category. The standards were not generous, but they were consistent and they were followed. The Keth had captured prisoners from 31 different species over 2 centuries of territorial expansion. They had processed all of them through the same system. The system had never produced significant problems. Then they captured the human children. It had not been intentional. The raid on Outpost. Karath 7 had been planned as a standard resource acquisition operation. In and out, minimal engagement, maximum efficiency. The outpost was a small human installation on the edge of contested territory, lightly defended, primarily a research and supply station. Intelligence had indicated a garrison of 40 adult personnel, standard defensive capability, no significant military asset value. Intelligence had not mentioned the school raid commander. Veth had been 3 minutes into the operation when his team leader on the ground had transmitted a message that contained words Veth had not expected to hear in the context of a raid. "Sir, we have a situation. There are children here." Veth had made the decision that his training indicated was correct. Complete the operation, collect all present, process through standard prisoner protocols. Children of most species were simply smaller versions of adults with less developed capabilities. The processing system accommodated them. He had made this decision without knowing what human children were. He learned quickly. The first indication came during transport. 37 human children, ranging in age from approximately 8 to 16 years by human developmental standards, were being transported in the holding section of the Keth vessel, along with the 11 adult personnel who had been captured at the outpost. They were not behaving the way prisoners behaved. Most species, when captured, went through a predictable sequence: shock, fear, some form of protest or resistance that subsided when the futility became clear, and then the quiet compliance of people in a situation they understood they could not immediately change. Children of most species accelerated through this sequence faster than adults, because children had less capacity for sustained resistance and more immediate need for comfort and security. Human children, apparently, had not received this information. The 8 to 10-year age group had, within 20 minutes of boarding, organized themselves into a corner of the holding area and were engaged in what appeared to be a detailed discussion. Not crying, not frightened silence, discussion with the focused intensity of people working on a problem. The 11 to 13 age group had spent the first 20 minutes conducting what appeared to be a systematic examination of the holding area, testing surfaces, noting access points, observing the guard rotation. One of them had found and was examining with great interest a panel seam that the ship's designers had considered cosmetic. The 14 to 16 age group was watching the guards, not the way prisoners watched guards, with the peripheral awareness of people tracking a threat, with the direct, categorizing attention of people learning something they intended to use. Guard Captain Drex had been watching the holding area on the monitoring feed for 30 minutes when he called his superior. "Sir," he said, "I think the children are planning something." His superior had told him, with the patient condescension of someone who had processed prisoners from 31 species, that children did not plan things. They were frightened and confused, and the appearance of organization was a coping behavior. Drex had looked at the monitoring feed. The 8-year-old in the corner of the youngest group had just drawn something on the floor with a piece of debris she had apparently collected during the boarding process. The others were gathered around it. It looked like a diagram. "Yes, sir," Drex said. Of course, he did not look away from the monitoring feed. The processing facility on Keth Station 7 was efficient and well run. It had received prisoners from 11 separate operations in the past 18 months and had processed all of them without significant incident. The facility manager, Administrator Kovath, had 30 years of experience and a reputation for running the smoothest intake operation in the Keth Territorial Administration, was not prepared for the human children. The intake process began normally. Adult prisoners first, documented, assessed, assigned quarters. The adults were subdued in the way that captured personnel generally were. Cooperative, quiet, watching everything, but quietly. Then the children. The youngest group came through intake with the apparent compliance of children who had accepted their situation. They answered questions. They submitted to assessment. They were polite in a way that Kovath found slightly unnerving without being able to say exactly why. She reviewed the intake assessments afterward. Every child in the youngest group had, during the intake process, asked at least 3 questions. The questions had appeared to be simple, curious children asking about their environment. Standard behavior. The intake officers had answered most of them because answering was easier than not answering, and the questions seemed harmless. The questions, Kovath realized when she laid them out in sequence, were not random. They had covered between them the facility's layout, staffing levels at different times of day, food and water distribution schedule, communication systems, emergency protocols, and the location of the facility's primary power junction, from children between 8 and 10 years old, who had coordinated their questions without appearing to coordinate them. She called her security chief. Security Chief Tavin had dealt with difficult prisoners before. He had not dealt with difficult children before, which was a distinction he had not previously considered significant and was now considering very carefully. The middle-age group, 11 to 13, had been assigned to a shared dormitory space. Standard configuration designed for security. Tavin had reviewed the space personally before the children were assigned to it and had found nothing concerning. 6 hours after assignment, one of his guards had reported that a child in the middle group had requested maintenance access to fix a light fixture that was flickering. There was no flickering light fixture. When the guard had pointed this out, the child, a boy of approximately 12, had expressed confusion and indicated the fixture in question. The guard had looked at the fixture. It had flickered. Tavin reviewed the monitoring feed later and watched the 40 seconds before the guard looked at the fixture. The boy had done something to the fixture. Quickly, with the casual competence of someone who knew exactly what they were doing, he had introduced a fault that produced a flicker on demand. In 40 seconds, with no tools, using, as far as Tavin could determine, a component he had removed from somewhere in the dormitory space, from somewhere that Tavin spent 3 hours looking for and did not find. He called Administrator Kovath. "The children," he said, "are not behaving like children." "I know," she said. "Tell me what you have," he told her. There was a long pause. "Pull everything we have on human child development," she said. "Everything. I want to know what we are dealing with." What the Keth's intelligence database contained on human child development was, Kovath discovered, inadequate. Not absent. There was material. Observations from diplomatic contacts, trade missions, the various points of intersection between Keth and human civilization over 2 decades of uneasy coexistence. But the material had been collected with the assumption that children were a peripheral concern. Noted, documented at a surface level, not studied seriously because children were not strategically relevant. The material that existed did contain, she found when she read it carefully, things that had been noted and not understood. A diplomatic contact had observed that human children in a playground setting engaged in what appeared to be combat training disguised as play. The observer had noted it as a cultural curiosity. Rough physical activity was common in many species' children and was not considered significant. A trade mission. Observer had noted that human children as young as 6 were taught something called stranger danger protocols and a systematic approach to assessing the trustworthiness and intentions of unknown individuals. The observer had noted it as an interesting cultural practice and moved on. A cultural exchange program participant had noted, in an aside in a longer report, that human children's entertainment media, their stories, their games, their recreational activities, had a striking emphasis on problem-solving under adverse conditions, on resource scarcity, on finding solutions with limited tools, on cooperation toward objectives. The observer had noted it as reflecting human cultural values and had not drawn any operational conclusions. Kovath drew operational conclusions. She pulled her security chief into a conference room with the intelligence files spread across the display, and they spent 4 hours going through it together. They trained them, Tevin said finally, from birth. Not formally. There is no military academy for 8-year-olds, but the entire cultural apparatus, the games, the stories, the activities, all of it systematically produces children who are, he stopped, capable, Kovath said. More than capable, he said. Adaptive, trained to assess environments, identify resources, cooperate toward objectives, solve problems with whatever is available. He paused. We have 37 of them in this facility, and we have been treating them like children from species whose children are, in fact, simply smaller and less capable adults. And human children are not, Kovath said. Human children, Tevin said slowly, appear to be smaller adults who have been specifically trained for situations like this one. The room was quiet for a moment. What do we do? He asked. Kovath thought about 30 years of experience, about 31 species processed without significant incident. We talk to them, she said. Directly, honestly, she paused. I think that is the only thing that is going to work. She requested a meeting with the oldest children, the 4 oldest, 16 years old. Human developmental stage she had now learned was called late adolescence, which her newly acquired understanding of human child development suggested meant something very different from what late adolescence meant in other species, and were brought to a conference room. They sat across from her with the calm assessment of people who had been preparing for this meeting since before she had decided to have it. She looked at them for a moment, then she decided to be direct. You have been conducting a systematic assessment of this facility since you arrived, she said. You have been coordinating information gathering across age groups. The youngest group mapped the facility layout and operational schedule during intake. The middle group has been identifying structural and technical vulnerabilities. Your group has been profiling the security personnel. She paused. I am correct? The 4 teenagers looked at each other briefly. Then the one who appeared to be the oldest, and a boy named, according to his intake file, Ren, looked at her directly. Yes, he said. She had expected denial. Or at least deflection. Why? She asked. Because that is what you do when you are captured, he said. Simply, without apology or bravado, as a statement of fact. You assess your environment. You identify resources and vulnerabilities. You develop options. You wait for the right moment or the right information, and then you act. He paused. We have not acted yet because we are still developing options. You are 16 years old, she said. Yes, he said. Where did you learn this? He looked at her as if the question was genuinely puzzling. Everywhere, he said. Games, stories, school. It is not a specific lesson. It is how we think about things. He paused. Humans spend a lot of time in situations that do not go the way they planned. You learn to adapt. Kovath looked at him for a long moment. I want to make you an offer, she said. I want to be honest with you about the situation, and I want to ask for something in return. Ren looked at her, then at the others briefly. Something passed between them. We are listening, he said. The offer she made was simple. The children would be returned, all 37 of them, the 11 adults as well. The operation had been, she said without quite saying it, a mistake, intelligence failure, insufficient understanding of what they were capturing, consequences that the Keth administration was not prepared to manage. In exchange, she asked for one thing, not a strategic concession, not a territorial agreement, not anything that would require political authorization she did not have. She asked Ren to explain to her, honestly, what the children had been planning. He looked at her for a long moment. Then he told her. It was, she thought, listening to it, genuinely impressive, using the information gathered by the youngest group, the vulnerabilities identified by the middle group, and the personnel profiles developed by the oldest group. A coordinated, simultaneous action that would have, if executed, created enough disruption to the facilities, systems to allow a significant portion of the children to reach the communication array on sub-level 3 and broadcast on the emergency frequency. that human vessels in the region monitored. They had developed it in 18 hours. 37 children, ranging from 8 to 16 years old, with no resources, no tools, and no prior knowledge of the facility. How long would it have taken to execute? She asked. We were planning for 48 hours from now, Ren said. We needed more information on the guard rotation at shift change. He paused. The 8-year-olds had almost finished mapping it. Kovath was quiet for a long time. The 8-year-olds, she said. They are very good at seeming like they are not paying attention, he said. Adults underestimate them. We use that, she looked at him. You use that, she said. Yes, he said. Humans learn very young that adults underestimate children. It is useful. The children were returned 4 days later. The after-action report that Kovath filed was the most unusual document she had produced in 30 years of facility management. The conclusion was brief. This operation captured 37 human children between the ages of 8 and 16. Within 18 hours of capture, the children had conducted a comprehensive facility assessment, identified primary vulnerabilities, developed a coordinated extraction plan, and were 48 hours from execution. No adult coordination was involved. The planning was conducted entirely among the children themselves, using skills that appeared to be standard across the human developmental experience rather than specialized training. Recommendation: human children are not to be treated as a low-security population. Further recommendation: update all intelligence assessments of human populations to account for the fact that human capability development begins significantly earlier than previously modeled. Final recommendation: do not capture human children. The operational and administrative complications significantly exceed any potential strategic value. The report was read by the Keth Territorial Administration Senior Counsel. It was classified. It was also quietly distributed to every facility manager in the Keth system with a single note attached. The note said, "This is not a joke. Read it." Every facility manager read it. None of them ever captured human children again.